Good Shabbos again, everyone. In many ways, our country, the United States, is still the envy of the world. We're blessed with unprecedented prosperity, unequaled freedoms, and an unrivaled spirit. But despite our great blessings, it seems that every single week we're cursed with a mass shooting. 2 weeks ago, we were cursed again with another mass shooting at a school. This time at an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas, where, as you know, 19 innocent children and 2 school teachers were murdered by an 18-year-old madman with an AR-15 semi-automatic rifle. Firearms, you may not know, became the leading cause of death for U.S. children in 2020. And there's already been 200 mass shootings this year, 27 at schools. 8,000 fellow Americans have been killed by guns this year alone, and we're only in June. Is there anything we can do? Our tradition can help. As it often does, Judaism does have something very relevant to say. For centuries, our tradition has allowed people to protect themselves. The 13th century commentator Nachmanides says that when Lemach, Adam's great-grandson, taught his son to smelt metal, his wives protested. They worried that through this simple act, humans would now be able to make swords, and Lemach would be bringing murder into the world. But Lemach replied to his wives that murder existed well before weapons. After all, his great-grandfather Cain was the world's first killer. He had murdered his own brother Abel with his bare hands. Swords, knives, and guns can only kill innocent people if they're used by evil people. And Jewish sources have always allowed for the innocent to own weapons to protect themselves against these evil people. At length, the rabbis of our Talmudic era discuss which kinds of swords, bows, even dogs people may own to protect their families and homes, but only at night. Because according to the Torah, as we read in the book of Exodus, a homeowner cannot kill a thief who robs his home in the daytime. The thief is robbing at a time when it is most likely that no one is present. So the Torah assumes the thief was not coming to hurt anyone. But if thief comes into your home at night, he's robbing at a time when he knows someone is probably at home, so the homeowner can kill the thief and not be held accountable for murder. The Torah and later rabbis clearly held that the homeowner must possess the ability to kill the thief or protect one's life. And many rabbis have made the point, if God forbid, if it comes to this in today's world, there's no better tool than a firearm. Only with a firearm is the old lady living alone a match for the thug. A baseball bat won't give her much of a chance. And law enforcement officials rarely have a chance to intervene to save a victim at the very moment of the crime. The rabbis teach us we indeed yearn for the time of the final redemption when they shall beat their swords into plowshares. But it's a very poor idea to ban gun ownership before that point in history. Years ago, conservative commentator Dennis Prager shared something that has stayed with me ever since. He suggested that the Nazis would not have been able to murder as many Jews had most European Jews had guns to protect themselves. If they knew that many Jews were armed, awaiting Nazis to enter every apartment, it's difficult to imagine that the Nazi genocidal machinery would have been nearly as effective. The tradition is clear. As long as evil people have guns, good people will need to have them as well. It's true for nations, which is why it's so important for America to have the strongest military, as it is true for individuals. Yet, with everything I've said so far this evening, in our tradition, a person does have the right to protect oneself and one's property and one's family. But even that right is limited. The Talmud gives us parameters and sets social standards of accountability, Jews do have the right to bear arms. The tradition's clear. But we also have the obligation to protect life and assure public safety. To do so, we find a serious concern in the tradition for the unregulated access to weapons. Nearly 2,000 years ago, our Talmudic rabbis prohibited the sale of weapons to enemies since they might eventually use them against us. Jewish law went further, prohibiting the sale of arms to people who were suspected of criminal intentions. In addition, the sale of weapons was heavily regulated to minimize the risk that they ended up in the hands of the mentally ill. The Talmud actually set limits on who could own weapons, not the child, not the coward, not the unstable person, or one who does not know or not has shown an understanding of how to use the best weapons of the day. And to help make sure that weapons were kept out of hands of people that shouldn't have them, Jewish courts limited access to guns and instituted their own form of background checks. One commandment from the Torah guided these decisions, and I believe has even more relevance today. In Leviticus 19:14, God commands us to avoid putting a stumbling block in front of the blind. You may have heard of that verse before, but the rabbis interpreted this important verse as speaking not only of a physical barrier, but more importantly, not putting a stumbling block in front of the blind includes anything that adds undue harm to someone who's unable to handle it. As we've often seen, guns can often become their own kind of dangerous stumbling block. From this, Jewish law teaches that we're commanded to remove any stumbling block which could cause death. Without proper restrictions, unstable and dangerous individuals who do not have the adequate means to keep their emotions in check would be able to legally acquire guns. And the law reminds us that if we leave the stumbling block and it brings about death, we're actually responsible for spilling another's blood. For example, as you know, there's a crisis in mental health with too many young people today. It's all around us. And yet, in this state, as in many other states in this country, we allow 18-year-olds in the middle of a mental health crisis to buy semi-automatic rifles. The tradition's clear to all of us. We're all responsible until we do the following. Our tradition is calling out to every single one of us to help keep guns out of the hands of dangerous individuals. We should enact red flag laws that permit police, family members, and co-workers to petition a state court to order the temporary removal of firearms from a person who they believe may present a danger to others or themselves. We ought to expand background checks for private transactions and gun shows. We should require specific training and a gun license before one can purchase a gun, especially a semi-automatic rifle. And we have a duty to raise the minimum age from 18 to at least 21 to purchase rifles like it is for handguns. As you've learned tonight, all of these possible modern-day regulations have a basis in the Jewish tradition. In these times of partisanship and division, I believe our tradition can provide an answer. Judaism holds that responsible, law-abiding Americans could have a Second Amendment right, enshrined by our founders, to bear arms. Yes, gun ownership should be protected, especially in a day and age when there are over 400 million guns already in circulation. The innocent should be able to protect themselves. But we also have an obligation to keep firearms out of the hands of some. Can there be more safeguards to increase the chances that guns only end up with law-abiding citizens? It's not only the responsible thing to do, it's not only the Jewish thing to do, it's the best way to protect the Second Amendment. for the greater good of society, we can do it. Long ago, the great Mordecai Kaplan bade us to consciously live in two civilizations, the best of one informing the other. He said, like Americanism, Judaism cherishes freedom, but it's always yoked with responsibility. Freedom and responsibility. And no law-abiding citizen should worry that he or she will lose the right to purchase a gun, yet there are steps we can take to keep firearms out of the hands of dangerous people, to remove the stumbling blocks before the blind, to enshrine this freedom with responsibility. My friends, I'm under no illusion that any possible new restrictions will solve all of our problems when it comes to guns in this country. But if responsible solutions can stop some of these tragedies from striking another community without destroying the Second Amendment, aren't they worth it? I believe most reasonable people would agree. Yes, gun ownership is a right protected by the U.S. Constitution. It should always be that way. Can all those on the left agree? But in a day and age with the advancement of weapons that allow deranged individuals to cause such enormous damage, to protect the innocent, can we as a society enact more restrictions to keep guns out of dangerous hands? Can all those on the right agree? And can we all work so that those on the extreme right and the extreme left no longer drown out the voices of the majority of Americans like you and me, a majority who respect the right of gun ownership but want to make it more difficult for criminals and the mentally unstable to possess guns? Over the next several weeks, Congress will vote on proposals intended to decrease gun violence in our communities. My prayer is that our leaders find sensible compromises so we do end up with more protections. But for that to happen, they'll need to hear from people like us. And it's understandable that many of us are frustrated. I recently heard that there's been an ongoing study of mass shootings in this country of ours for almost a half century. Mass shootings have been happening in the United States of America for nearly 50 years, and it's never been easier to own a gun. It's difficult to have faith in our elected leaders. Their familiar platitudes, such as thoughts and prayers to the families, seem hollow when offered without clear policy proposals. But let us not give up. I once heard a story about a group of Jews who gathered together in Jerusalem to pray for rain during a drought. As they prayed, one child innocently looked up at everyone and asked, "How come no one brought their umbrellas?" Yes, our prayers to end school shootings need to be serious efforts, accompanied by actions appropriate to the hope that our petitions will be answered. Can you hear it sown? May it be God's will. Shabbat Shalom. And now, as he beautifully does almost every Friday night now, Neil has a song that I think all of us have heard, but an appropriate song on this night when we talk about Jewish views of gun control.
Come gather round, people, wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accept it that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth saving, then you better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone, for the times they are a-changing. Come writers and critics who prophesize with your pen, and keep your eyes wide, the chance won't come again. And don't speak too soon, for the wheel's still in spin. There's no telling who that it's naming, for the loser now will be later to win, for the times they are a-changing. Come senators and congressmen, please heed the call. Don't stand in the doorway, don't block up the hall, for he that gets hurt will be who has stalled. There's a battle outside and it's raging. It'll soon shake your windows and rattle your walls, for the times they are a-changing. Come mothers and fathers throughout the land, and don't criticize what you can't understand. Your sons and your daughters are beyond your command. Your old road is rapidly aging. Please get out the new one if you can't lend a hand, for the times they are a-changing. The line it is drawn, the curse it is cast. The slow one now will later be fast, as the present now will later be the past. The order is rapidly fading, and the first one now will later be last, for the times they are a-changing.